Hey guys, what's going on? John here from What's Spinning, here tonight to chat about this new Bright Eyes album, Down in the Weeds Where the World Once Was. Omaha indie legends Bright Eyes, fronted by the legendary Conor Oberst, who in their early days, I'll be honest, around the time of letting off the happiness, I kind of, admired from afar. Conor Oberst's lyrics and passionate performances were truly ahead of its time. But the lo-fi and the shaky direction that they were going in wasn't in it for me. It was around the time of albums like Fevers and Mirrors and their Lifted album that I started to get on the Bright Eyes train. While not as explosive as their contemporaries, Bright Eyes really won me over with, once again, very classy lyrics, seriously, emotionally staggering performances as well. And they completely won me over with I'm Wide Awake It's Morning. It was this blend of indie rock and folk and sort of alternative country alongside Conor's very thought-provoking lyrics that really made me a huge fan. But ever since, Bright Eyes' road has been a really weird and confusing one. Digital Ash and the Digital Urn actually had some really great tracks on it, but overall it was just a very weird experimental album. On the other hand, after all these years, yes, it's a little bit more finely polished, but I don't think Casadega gets nearly as much credit as it deserves. And by the time The People's Key came out, Conor just sounded bored and tired, and honestly, so was I. Been a while since we've had a Bright Eyes album, but Conor's been busy with his solo career and working with Phoebe Bridgers. And when it comes to these new singles, honestly, I feel like they're very safe. Let's chat about this thing. A lot of the good tracks here may not be too much outside of Conor Oberst's comfort zone. And you know what? In a lot of ways, that's not that such of a bad thing. I love the burned out blues of Dance and Sing. Conor here comes off like one of the best bar singers you've ever heard, and that's something that I've always loved about him. It makes his lyrics just pop so much harder, and I love how prophetic and grim they are here. And between his withered vocals and that slide guitar, this sound is money. It's nothing outside of his comfort zone, but honestly, with the tracks like this, he sounds like he's on top form. Just Once in the World is another very standard folk rock tune, and I continue to love Conor's sort of grislier approach to his vocals at times like this. Honestly, very standard once again, but that's not a bad thing. To be honest, it sounds like a reworking of something that he would have come up with on one of Bright Eyes' classic albums. It picks up nicely too when those electric guitars come in. I'm genuinely excited. I mean, I don't want to put myself out there and say this is classic Bright Eyes, but it certainly sounds pretty damn close to it. Even these truly compelling lyrics, all is well for the moment. Mariana Trench honestly took a real long time to grow on me. When I first heard it, I kind of just shrugged at it. I didn't think it was necessarily bad or good. But its progression, just how catchy it is, and its very compelling lyrics, once again, has really won me over. There's also this weird intensity to this track that just seems to fit very well and nestled in on this album. And the addition of the horns and the pretty intense drumming towards the end are great as well. Later on, Stairwell Song is a real great deep cut. This sounds like a sort of rustic old school folk cover. And for a sort of somber, downtrodden folk jam, this sounds great. Especially in Conor's performance, there is just such a sadness in his voice here. It sounds like he's going to break down and cry at any second. It makes this track really, really win me over. And between the plucked ukulele and the horn section, it's very classy sounding. It's back to basics for Bright Eyes here, but honestly, I would rather take that than some of the experimentation we heard on The People's Key. I have a lot of the same feelings on Tilt-A-Whirl as well. It's very dainty, very rustic sounding. Once again, sounds like an old school folk cover. The way it progresses too is just so graceful and lovely. It's even a little mysterious at times, something that I feel like Conor's been trying to do for a while now, even with some of the later Bright Eyes albums, like 10 years ago. It's a great sound for a Bright Eyes album in 2020, and it's so passionate, and it's so well performed. My only issue with this is, honestly, I kind of wish it was like twice as long. It's really that good. However, there also is a shocking amount of filler on here and experiments that don't really go the right way. Page Turner's Rag as an intro. Wow, I was baffled by this. This is an absolutely abysmal waste of time, the sort that would probably have shown up on The People's Key. We get these never-ending ragtime pianos and horns, which I don't necessarily hate, but alongside vocal snippets and a weird spoken word dialogue that reminds me way too much of the intro to Jane's Addiction's Stop. I'm not in on this. One and Done has some really epic moments towards the end, but hearing tracks like this make me worry that Conor Oberst kind of doesn't have that more experimental side to him out of his system. This one is like morbid and slow and just These are things that honestly I usually like in Connor's music, but here it just does not sound natural. Pan and Broom isn't that much better. As a matter of fact, it's even worse. This just sounds like a who's who of any indie band trying to be Bright Eyes in 2020. We shouldn't be here right now. It's tough to freaking listen to. Even lyrically, Connor has done so much better on this album. With this track, we're not in Kansas anymore. And the rest of this album is just really frustrating because we go from really great tracks to tracks that I don't have anything good or bad to say about. I personally don't think Persona Non Grata is a bad track. Once again, back when I first heard this a few months ago as a single, I kind of shrugged at it, didn't think it was good or bad, and I kind of still feel that way. It's not that exciting, it's nothing new, it's nothing we haven't heard before. I do like the somber tone here, and the bagpipes are a nice touch, but outside of that, I'm not feeling this, really. Hot Car in the Sun is okay at best. I mean, it's not a bad track, but if I heard this track years ago, I would start to worry that Connor was running out of ideas. Lyrically, it's beautiful and still way ahead of the game, but as far as the instrumental goes, I'm falling asleep over here. It's just so middle of the road, so much so I can't rant and rave about this album like I would love to. Forced Convalescence, it's fine. But here, the level of safeness on this album just seems to rear its ugly head and stare at me right in the eyes. This sounds like the kind of track that Conor Oberst wrote in 10 minutes, recorded in 10 minutes more, and it sounds fine. But nothing about this shakes me to my core. Nothing about this brings me back for round two. We'll say this, the very lavish instrumentals that eventually pop in do excite me. But outside of that, this just kind of sounds like a decent track from one of their last albums before they broke up for a while. One that made me worry that, yeah, it sounds okay, but they're running out of ideas. And Calais to Dover, honestly, it sounds really nice, but honestly, there's nothing about this that grips me. Once again, it's very phoned in. And it's a shame because when it comes to the chorus, it is one of the most passionate here, maybe even the most passionate here. But the rest of this track is painfully average, much like most of this album. I will say this though, the good does outweigh the bad and the average. Death's Heart in 3 parts is honestly a really fantastic late album track. In a sea of incredibly wordy, thought-provoking performances, this track seems just way ahead of everything else. This is a pretty somber album overall. It's magnified so much here. And the progressive, almost psychedelic instrumental here is something we haven't heard yet. It's refreshing. It's out of their comfort zone, but it works. And I don't hate Comet Song as a finale. As a matter of fact, it might be my favorite track on this entire album. I am so impressed by how passionate this track is. It's the culmination of what Connor was trying to do towards the end of Bright Eyes' career, as well as everything else he's been doing without them. Not only that, but it reminds me of what attracted me to his music in the first place. It's just so filled with drama, and it's so lavish. It is a freaking monolithic finale and a great, great tune. So, you know what? This has actually probably been one of the hardest albums for me to rate over the years so far. What's good here is very good, refreshing, and reminds me of what I once truly loved about Conor Oberst and Bright Eyes. However, for every good track here, there is a weird experimental track as well as one that's just so painfully average that it doesn't do anything to me. But I still think the good does outweigh the average here. I'm feeling like the lightest of light 7s on this album, but let me know what you guys think down below. If you liked the video, be sure to give us a like, give us a subscribe, and let me know down below what you would like for me to chat about in the future. And until next time, have a great day, guys.